Expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you said.
Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Jan Crawford. Today, the politics of same-sex marriage just one day after a federal judge struck down a California ban. And the Senate vote on Elena Kagan, poised to become the 112th justice on the Supreme Court and only the 4th woman. Joining me to talk about both of these issues is Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions, the ranking Republican on the Judiciary Committee, who's led the opposition against Kagan, and last night from the Senate floor blasted the federal judge who said California's gay marriage ban was unconstitutional. Take a look.
Obviously, at some point, this will get to the Supreme Court of the United States, as you well know. It go first to the Ninth Circuit, on which you clerked, and then it'll go to the Supreme Court probably. And we'll have the nominee that's before us today, who's already demonstrated at Harvard that her views about don't ask, don't tell, and similar social marriage, sexual relation matters involve such strong feelings on her part that she's not been able to follow the law. And I'm worried about that. I think the American people are worried about that. And I just think they have a right to be.
Senator Sessions, thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk about that ruling yesterday. What did you find to be the most troubling thing in that judge's decision?
Well, first, the perspective is that a single sitting federal judge has just invalidated the vote of millions of Californians who desire to define what marriage is in California. They define it as between a man and a woman. And he has overruled that. There's nothing in any of the provisions of our Constitution that would have suggested that any of those drafters of it intended that the Constitution would be interpreted as to mandating the recognition of same-sex marriages. It's just not there. It's a matter that should be left to the people, not be decided by an unelected, lifetime appointed judge who clearly was, from his opinion, was citing his own views, emotions, and feelings about this issue.
Well, now, you said last night in your floor speech that obviously this is going to be appealed and probably up to the Supreme Court. You're a lawyer, obviously. You're on the Judiciary Committee. What do you think this will mean if it is ultimately upheld by the Supreme Court, if the court adopts this rationale?
Well, it will mean that they have declared that the United States Constitution requires that same-sex marriages be recognized just the same as normal marriages. And this is a huge legislative act, would be by the courts if they were to do that. My understanding is that, if I'm not mistaken, the California court has already upheld, the California State Supreme Court upheld this act. I would hope Supreme Court would uphold the people's decision and not the judge's decision, but it does remain to be seen. And Elena Kagan, who's already demonstrated a very strong, personal, deep bias on these kind of issues, will be one of the judges, if confirmed, that will decide the case.
Well, now, before we go on to Kagan, let me just ask you one more question about this ruling, though. I mean, if the Supreme Court, let's just play this out. If the Supreme Court decides to uphold this ruling and say there is a constitutional right to same-sex marriage, what is the impact of that going to be across the country? What's your sense of how controversial this will be? How will people react?
It will be very controversial. People will react adversely for two reasons. They'll react adversely if they don't like the policy, and they'll react adversely if they believe it's not the judicial role to define marriage when it's not in the Constitution. And remember this, when a judge declares that the Constitution says you must recognize same-sex marriage, this cannot be changed by a state legislature. No state government can change it, not even the federal Congress can. Only by a constitutional amendment. 2/3 of both houses, 3/4 of the states. That's what it takes when they declare something is in the Constitution. And when it's not, it's a tremendous abuse of power by a judge who's unelected and unaccountable to the public.
Now, you predicted, I think last night, you showed your cards that you think that Elena Kagan would probably vote to uphold this judge's ruling and find that there's a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. What makes you think that?
Well, she has indicated support for the most activist judges in the country. She's clerked for some of them. She advocates that a judge should allow their personal views, biases, background to influence their decision, and that's what President Obama said he was doing when he appointed her. He wanted somebody to do that. And we know, based on her effort at Harvard to block the military, because the military policy passed by Congress didn't satisfy her view of handling homosexuality in the military, that she has a bias and a strong feelings in that way. So I think it would appear to me that she strongly would favor the judge's ruling out there, personally. And secondly, her view of the Constitution and the role of a judge is such that she believes a judge is empowered and should indeed allow their personal values to influence the decision. So the combination is toxic. You get a political activist liberal believing that they have the right to use that judicial decision-making power to set policy. It's not a good thing.
But you know, she's one vote. I think most people think of it, seems to me anyway, that this is going to be 5-4. You know, you've got your 4 liberals on one side, Kagan being the new one, presumably, since it looks like she's going to get confirmed later today, the 4 conservatives, and Justice Kennedy, you know, that human jump ball right there in the middle. So, I mean, this is all going to come down to one vote, isn't it, eventually? Anthony Kennedy?
That's probably what conventional wisdom would say.
Now, are you saying I have conventional wisdom? Come on, that's supposed to be insightful.
Well, you are insightful, and that's conventional wisdom by careful court watchers.
Thank you. That's better.
Good lawyers would say that's probably the way it may well break down. But the way I see it, Jan, is that every vote on the Supreme Court is critical. You should not say, well, we're not worried about it because Justice Stevens may have voted that way, the judge she's replacing, and so don't worry about it. No, every vote is important, and every judge confirmed should be committed to following the law objectively, impartially, not to allow their personal views and feelings and concepts and ideology to influence the objective duty they have to follow the law, whether they like it or not.
Well, now this is obviously something that you've been really hammering on for the past couple months during this Kagan confirmation process, but obviously looks like she's going to get confirmed later on this afternoon. What's the latest you're hearing about how many Republicans are going to vote for her?
Well, I think 5 have said they would vote for her, mostly in the Northeast area and in her area, but it's but the polling data show her numbers are well below that of Justice Sotomayor even. And
you mean her support by the public?
Support by the public is well below 50%. It's a record low, actually. And I think that there'll be more no votes than normal.
Well,
more no votes than on Sotomayor, which indicates her nomination has not played well. It indicates the American people are concerned about President Obama's philosophy. And I can tell you, he has a philosophy that I think is flawed, but he is appointing judges who agree with his philosophy. And they're going to be the kind of judges that won't hesitate, I'm afraid, to advance the law in ways they think might be better for the country.
Now, you've got one Democrat who's going to vote against her, Ben Nelson.
Yeah.
What does that say to you? I mean, does that say that he's concerned about what people back in his home state are thinking? He's feeling some heat there on some of her positions on these issues?
Yeah, it's a good. I think Ben Nelson and I have talked over the years about judges. He voted for a number of Reagan Bush judges that other Democrats opposed. He appointed a lot of judges as governor of Nebraska. He has a view that judges should show restraint. I think it was a very significant signal when Ben Nelson analyzed this nominee and found her wanting.
All right, and finally, Senator Sessions, I got to ask you, though, what about this whole notion? I mean, Sam Alito, you and I have discussed this before. Sam Alito was highly qualified. No one questioned his intellect, his experience. Yet all these Democrats voted against him, and you were making the arguments then that, listen, he's qualified, let's just vote for him. Why doesn't that work this go around with Kagan?
Good question and a fair question. Justice Alito was not only qualified, he was a magnificent nominee and did a fabulous job at the hearing, demonstrating the clarity of mind you look for in a great judge, the experience, the ability to talk about cases without hesitation. He was a superb nominee, and he was committed to the philosophy that a judge should show restraint, not allow their personal values to influence their decision-making. Nominee Kagan has the least experience of any judge in 50 years. She had 2 years of law practice right after law school and 14 months as Solicitor General. She's not prepared for this office. She does not have, in my view, from the hearing, really the kind of clarity of thought and approach to law you would look for in a judge. I think the president just made a mistake. And she also, let me say this, I strongly believe that after promising explicitly to defend the Don't Ask, Don't Tell law as Solicitor General when it was challenged, she did not do so. She violated her commitment to the Congress, and she violated her duty as Solicitor General. And I think that's disqualifying in itself.
All right, well, it's pretty strong words, Senator Sessions. Is there anyone you would have rather seen the president nominate? I mean, elections have consequences. He is the president.
That's true. Elections do have consequences, but the president could have submitted somebody that would have great Republican support. In fact, I'll vote for 90% of his nominees to the other judges, spots around the country. But he could absolutely have chosen a real strong judge, maybe more expansive in the law than I would be, but somebody that would have strong bipartisan support. Instead, he chose a nominee that was guaranteed to be controversial.
All right. Well, Senator, as always, we really appreciate your time and your insight. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you got a busy day and you got to vote later on, and we know you're going to vote no. What do you think the final vote will be?
I think it'll be a pretty high no vote. Our members tend to try to give deference to the president. I believe we should give some deference to the president's nomination. But in this nominee, I think you'll see considerably more no votes than Sotomayor. And as you indicated, at least one Democrat will be voting no.
All right. So under 65 yeses?
Well, I won't speculate
right around there?
about that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll wait and see.
There's been no whipping on the Republican side, no pushing on senators to vote. Every senator is just voting as they feel is best.
All right. Well, Senator, thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thank
you. Look forward to talking to you again soon. And now for the other side, we're going to bring in Richard Socarides, who was so gracious talking to us. I don't know if any of you guys remember this during those critical and sometimes controversial Kagan confirmation hearings, where he was able to give us his perspective on Elena Kagan, having worked with her in the Clinton White House. Richard's also going to be able to talk to us about Proposition 8, something he's also the gay marriage, same-sex marriage ban that the federal judge struck down, something that he's also written quite extensively about. Richard, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Jen.
It's good to have you back. I'm sorry you're not in studio, but thank you for joining us by the
phone.
My
pleasure.
You listened to the Senator Sessions interview.
Boy, they're really, you get the feeling that this is their last gasp, and I'm not surprised that the connection is made with this decision yesterday and the vote today. But they're really throwing everything at it, everything they've got left. And I thought Senator Sessions was really making more of an argument against the role of the judiciary than he was about same-sex marriage.
Right, against the role of judges just getting involved in too many of these cases.
In anything.
These issues. Right, yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about the opinion first, which I know you've had a chance to read. And obviously, I mean, greeted yesterday with tremendous joy in California, and then also a great amount of consternation and controversy, depending on where you come down on this. What's your take on the ruling? When you look at the ruling, it's going to be appealed. What's your take on that, and what do you think is going to happen on appeal?
Well, the ruling is quite thorough and quite sweeping, and to get a sense of it, I read it last night on the computer, but this morning when I got to my office, I printed it out, and it lands on your desk with a thump.
Well, it's 136 pages.
I have it in front of me now. It's like you can't carry it around. It's like so thick, and much of it is single spaced. the judge did the judge knew that he was writing for the ages and writing for posterity, I guess, and it's about as thorough a legal opinion you would ever see. And it's obviously going to get a lot of scrutiny, and it was obviously written by someone who wanted it to withstand a lot of scrutiny. But I think it's really a moment for the gay rights movement in this country. I mean, it's the first time a federal judge in this kind of sweeping language has held that the Constitution prohibits discrimination against gays and lesbians based upon just their status. And this was the legal dream team that came together, Ted Olson and David Boies. And
right, who as of course were on opposite sides in Bush versus Gore. Yeah. I mean, they've come together now in this case with an eye on the Supreme Court.
And they put together a very simple case here, really, and a very simple argument. They got two couples who've been together each for over 10 years who were in love and wanted to get married, and they said that under the Constitution they couldn't be treated differently just because of their status, and the judge agreed with them.
Well, now, the judge in his ruling, which I think, as you point out, I mean, it's obviously written with an eye on that appeal that everybody knows is coming and probably all the way up to the Supreme Court. He has 80 different findings of fact, including these kind of sweeping, like you said, statements where it really is just this enormous victory, not only for same-sex marriage, but for gay people, where he says same-sex love and intimacy are well documented in human history, and that same-sex couples are identical to opposite-sex couples and their abilities to have relationships, and that religious beliefs that homosexuality is a sin those religious beliefs harm gays and lesbians. I mean, what kind of what does that mean, having those kind of strong findings of fact like that as this case unfolds?
I think the point you're making is really a very important one, because I think that this decision will come to be seen about much more than just same-sex marriage. And of course, the battle around same-sex marriage is important, but it takes on its symbolic importance because it's a stand-in for something larger in society. Whether or not we're going to treat gays and lesbians as fully equal in every way, and whether or not sexual orientation issues are worthy of a civil rights struggle. A decision like this, which not only says that gay people ought to be able to be married, but they are, in the eyes of the law, the same as everyone else and cannot really be discriminated against in any way, is usually symbolic within the gay community, and I think will really be a rallying cry, but really also becomes politically very symbolic because, for a long time in this country, gays and lesbians have said that the way to go is incremental change, and even in within the Democratic Party, the change has been incremental, starting with Bill Clinton, who was the first person when I worked for him ever to embrace support from the gay and lesbian community. But all along the way, it's been little bits and pieces here, little bits and pieces there. And President Obama, has been terrific in many ways and has said that he supports equal rights for gay people, but he doesn't support this, So I think you're going to begin to see people in the public sphere are no longer going to be able to take these nuanced positions on issues like this. You're either going to be for full equal rights as guaranteed by the Constitution, or you're not.
So it's going to kind of force their hand. I mean, this decision, you're saying, could force politicians' hands to finally, come out of the closet on their views and really say what they think and vote the way that they really believe?
Yes, and you see some of that already. Even before this decision, in some of the more progressive states, you see people coming out for this. But President Obama and the Democratic Party, especially in the next 2 years, not so much in the midterms, but in the next 2 years, face important challenges, because what are they going to say in their Democratic Party platform when the president runs again in 2012? They're going to have a platform that supports full equal rights, and they're going to have to be for this. And the president right now is not for this.
Well, one of the things when you were talking about the Dream Team and, Ted Olson and David Boies taking this case on, a lot of these gay rights groups didn't think this was a good strategy, that they don't think the Supreme Court is ready to go this far, that the court is not ready to recognize a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. This is all going to hinge on Anthony Kennedy. What do you think about that?
Well, you're absolutely correct, and a lot of the established gay rights groups were very hesitant to endorse this early on, but I think that they've been mostly persuaded, and I think there's nobody in this country better than Ted Olson at predicting. You know, obviously you can't completely predict how the Supreme Court would come out, but I think that he and David Boies feel pretty good that they have a strong case before the Supreme Court. And I mean, it will probably be a 5-4 decision, but I think they're going to be on the right side of that, and you know, nobody knows better than them.
All right. Well, Richard, thanks so much. We really appreciate your joining us and look forward to having you back in the studio next time.
Thanks, Jan.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
And finally, we're going to really shift gears now and talk about something that's captivated Washington, D.C., but not quite as political as what we normally get. We've got Politico's Kiki Ryan to join us today to dish about Bravo's newest housewives, the Real Housewives of D.C. The series premieres tonight and features all these Washington socialites, including, of course, those infamous White House state dinner crashers, the Salahis. So, Kiki, the question of the day that everyone's wanting to know. First of all, you've seen it. Okay.
Yes.
So, did the Salahis steal the show, or are they just, like, continuing to be their, front row gate crashing selves?
Absolutely. This is definitely the Salahi show. In the first episode...
Wait, is that a good thing?
I guess it's good for ratings. It's good for Bravo. But you'll see just in the first episode, the 4 other ladies are very separate from the Salahis. They don't really travel in the same social circle. And even before the show started, the Salahis were a household name. And again, this week in just the promotional events, the Salahis are standing out. I mean, just on Saturday night, Tarek Salahi allegedly threw a glass of wine in one of the housewives' faces at an event.
Oh, my.
I know. And then yesterday...
Can't you get arrested for that?
I guess she threw back.
Oh, okay. That
would have been good on camera. That's the stuff that they want to catch. And then just yesterday, they were on The View, and Michaela Salahi said that Whoopi Goldberg assaulted her backstage.
Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah, and she didn't like that so much. So you can imagine that there was an altercation there. So, yeah, you'll see that the Salahis are not the beloved.
All right, so 5 housewives.
Uh-huh.
The competition, for reasons that escape me, was really fierce to be one of the 5 here in D.C., leading up to this. So tell us about the other 4 that made the cut.
The other 4 are, women around town. The funny thing is about all 5 of them is none of them are really these big Washington power players that you would think, and I know Bravo wanted a cast because, especially in Washington, people of the power really want to keep private.
Right.
So, one of the women owns real estate in town. Another one has a modeling
agency.
She's
the nice one, right?
Stacey Turner.
She's the nice one.
She's the nice one.
With the well-behaved kids.
Yes,
yeah, okay.
yes, and a nice husband. Mm-hmm. She seems to be very grounded.
Okay.
Then we have Linda, who owns a modeling agency in town, and she has a lot younger boyfriend.
Which I think someone has said is kind of akin to having like the leading car dealership in Charleston, or
or like
a big deal.
We
have a modeling agency in D.C.
People don't even realize that we do have one, but we have that, and then a lot of the other women just do charity work. So there's no real. Oh, actually, Kat had the strongest tie to the White House because her husband, now his ex-husband, is a White House photographer. So that one tie now is, if there is a second season, won't be there. But and those ties you really see in the first episode.
So she used the husband to get the shit. No, I'm just kidding.
Surprised that he'd let her do it, but in the first episode you'll see that they really are trying to play up those ties, no matter how weak they are. Kat, shows on her iPhone a picture that her husband sent her of Biden in the back of a limo. Stacey says that she's met Obama before at Harvard. All these little ties. Mary's father was a lobbyist who was friends with Ethel Kennedy. So you'll see that
she's kind of the most old money established of the bunch, right?
She is,
because all these shows are, kind of, they all are characters, right? I mean, they're kind of edited to make people characters and all that.
Exactly.
So does it work? I mean, based on the first episode, is it going to be the runaway, hit like what, New Jersey and Atlanta?
Yeah. Well, it's hard because being inside the Beltway, I think we will all look at it differently than the rest of the country. I think that it will be entertaining to a lot of the people here. We might be a little bit too critical because we know a lot of us know these women or have seen them at events, and that's not really that high part of an event because we know it. Yeah. But outside, I think people will enjoy it, especially because of the Salahis. They have a lot of antics, so it's always good.
But will it be as good as Orange County?
Well, that did start it all. So who knows? I like New Jersey, but I don't think there's going to be anyone quite as crazy as what we see on that.
And this is for one season. Is that
they've only filmed one season right now. I'm hearing that they're actually looking around town for a site to do the reunion episode, but I haven't heard anything yet about a second season. I think they're going to wait to see how the initial ratings do. And of course, the last episode, which is the whole White House crashing that they caught on tape.
That's the last episode.
That'll be, yeah, because they're going to make
So we got to wait all year.
They're going to make us watch it all and, yeah, get that in the season
Not
finale.
that we really haven't seen enough of it.
Exactly. If we haven't heard enough about the Salahi's, just wait. It's just starting right now.
Great. All right. Well, Kiki, thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us. Really appreciate it. It's good to have you here as always.
Thank you. Good being here.
And thank you for watching Washington Unplugged. Join us every day right here on CBSNews.com. I'm Jan Crawford, and I'll be back here Tuesday with, of course, the New York Times fantastic Jeff Zeleny. Have a great day.